We got bad news on Monday that Chargers wide receiver Mike Williams has been put on the PUP list, and it's not time to panic yet, but all of a sudden it looks like Justin Herbert will be without two of his top four receivers heading into training camp.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 10 seasons, but this is our 8th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day, and it's great to be back every day. And thank you to the everydayers who were here throughout the offseason and are ready to gear up for this new upcoming season and training camp coming up. To make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, the Chargers get to have their training camp start a little bit earlier because they have the Hall of Fame game this year. And so that means we get some information about players going on PUP. And unfortunately, Mike Williams is one of them. And another big name on the defense, Elijah Molden, also starting on PUP. Very, very important. Speaking of Elijah Molden and the other defensive players, we got to get into the biggest defensive camp battles after going over the offense yesterday. Of course, Hart, big one against Donte Jackson. And then, of course, Junior Colson versus Denzel Perryman. Is it Junior Colson's time?
Yeah, I think that's best case scenario, man. Him and, Deion Henley kind of taking that over would be, I think, really good for this defense if he can actually improve from what we saw from him as a rookie. But today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's game time. David, we did get some unexpected news from the Chargers on Monday, and that was a list of players that were put on the PUP list. Like you said, Chargers getting to start training camp 10 days early because of that Hall of Fame game they have coming up. But it unfortunately comes with some bad news, including Mike Williams specifically being on the PUP list. And there's some other guys, Elijah Molden, which we'll talk about, who isn't as much of a surprise coming back from a serious injury, but we don't know what Mike Williams' injury is, which doesn't actually help anything. I think the reason it's not time to panic is this. Per Adam Schefter, a player can come off the PUP list at any point in the training camp. It's just roster management tool at this time of year, which I would agree with. This is not the PUP that will cause you to miss 4 games at the beginning of the season, like an IR slot would. So it doesn't necessarily mean this is going to cost any of these guys any playing time or any actual regular season games, but it just sucks specifically for Mike Williams, David. I mean, especially when you have the Trey Harris situation going out over here with him holding out, and now another one of Justin Herbert's new shiny weapons, Mike Williams, going into training camp unhealthy, which we all know for him is the biggest red flag that came with that signing.
Always. I mean, with Mike Williams, we know what it is. We've followed Mike Williams his entire career, and so we know when he's on the field, he's one of the most dynamic jump ball wide receivers in the NFL. But his brand of football, it causes him to get injured quite a lot. It's just something that comes along with that particular skill set he brings to the table. Now, this injury we don't really know anything about, and so it's just not an ideal situation to be going into training camp missing 2 of your top, would-be offensive weapons with Trey Harris holding out and Mike Williams dealing with something, as, Jim Harbaugh would put it. He's working through something. We just don't know what that is. But right now, this is, something not to be super worried about. I mean, I think we have to consider, hey, the Chargers are starting training camp a little bit early, right? It's the middle of July. We still have quite a bit of time before the Chargers kick things off in Brazil to start the season. So not something to get super concerned or worried about, but it's just one of those things where you're like, man, I just wish we weren't starting off on this foot.
Well, especially because a lot of the, part of his bad season in 2024 rewrote up or chalked up to the fact that he was coming back from a major injury, and especially for skill position offensive players, that's something that can take a little while to kind of get your feet under him, not to mention all the kind of weird situations he was in, being on 2 separate teams, being with Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson at these points in their career, never really hitting it off with either of them. But most importantly, it's really hard to say, hey, he is going to kind of get that juice back that he had pre-injury when he's already starting off training camp in 2025 with an injury. So that's tough. Also tough because, we heard Jim Harbaugh say that he wasn't expecting any of the players who missed time during minicamps and OTAs, which Mike Williams did, to have to miss time in training camp, which is just untrue at this point because we're seeing, 5 guys already on the PUP list. And all of a sudden, you said 2 of his top 4 weapons. Really, man, probably 3 of his top 5 weapons when you now talk about what's happening with Najee Harris and his eye and what's going on with that. 3 of the biggest additions, arguably the 3 biggest additions, outside of Omarion Hampton that this team made offensively, and those guys are starting on the PUP list, or, 2 of the 3 of them, and Najee Harris, we'll see when he gets into camp. But bad news for one player means good news for another player, and David, with Trey Harris holding out and now Mike Williams not starting training camp healthy, is it Keandre Lambert-Smith time? Because all of a sudden, after missing some time earlier on, if he can come back healthy, which we don't actually know yet at this point if he will, because he was out last time we saw him, but now he has a golden opportunity.
Yeah, this is a big opportunity for him, especially after missing a lot of time in the offseason, not really being able to get a chance to get on the field and catch some passes from Justin Herbert, who I'm sure he hopes to catch a ton of passes from in his NFL career. But now is where it really starts for him. I mean, you look at that depth chart and, you have a couple of guys that are ahead of you, obviously, with Lab and Conkey and Quentin Johnston. But now opportunity is a knocking. You have that chance to be able to establish that chemistry, and it starts right now when you get into training camp, as we are on, the doorstep of that beginning. Hopefully, he's ready to go. He's feeling good. He's been in the playbook, so hopefully that he knows exactly what he's doing. So when he gets on the field, it's all about showing that he can make those plays and being that deep threat that the Chargers desperately need in this offense. He was brought in for one specific reason, basically, and that's the stretch to the field. A guy that can go catch the ball over his shoulder, really bring that blazing speed. That's what KLS does. Hopefully he shows that and he gains that trust from Justin Herbert so we can catch some of those big bombs.
And we know that they're very high on him, but it's also good news for the Jalen Ragers of the world, the Brendan Rices of the world, who kind of started off with really uncertain outside looking in, futures and going into training camp, to where now maybe some opportunities arise. But Elijah Molden is the other guy we have to talk about here. There were other players on the list, including Delshon Phillips, special teams linebacker. They brought in Savion Williams, undrafted free agent tackle, and also Jalen Johnson, who's had some impressive moments as a Charger, even though he's never been on the active roster. But the big other name here is Elijah Molden, and I think that this isn't a surprise. I mean, the dude broke his fibula in week 17 last year, so the fact that he was already out there at minicamp and OTAs working off to the side and kind of working his way back onto the field is good news, I would say. Not concerned about this Elijah Molden PUP news, but what I would just say is we shouldn't underrate how important Elijah Molden is and just how important it'll be for him to get back on the field as soon as possible.
I mean, it's really as simple as this. If Elijah Molden doesn't perform as well as he does on the back end, then Derwin James doesn't get that all-pro nod that he got for being a slot corner, because you're not able to put him closer to the line of scrimmage and let him attack and get upfield and really do what he does best if you don't have people that you trust on the back end. And Elijah Molden proved very, very quickly that not only is he someone to trust, but he's a playmaker back there. So I think with Elijah Molden, I mean, not to be too concerned here, but I feel like this is something where they're just not trying to rush him. They just want to make sure that everything is ready to go. You kind of do this the right way. You still got plenty of time to be able to make sure that you work him in. And also, he played pretty much the entire season. So this is not a situation where you have to catch him up on the defense and on what he needs to do. He knows what he needs to do. So no reason to rush. Just make sure that he's 100% full go whenever he gets back on the football field, because he is a very important part of this defensive backfield.
And also, he's not penciled into the starting role. He's permanent markered into the starting role. He was, the best safety for a lot of last season on this team. This team has Derwin James on it, who ended up clicking much more down the stretch of the year. But early on, man, he was a savior for this defense. And really the perfect pairing with Derwin James, something they've looked for since they drafted him, something they thought they had in Nazir Adderley that never worked out, and JT Woods, and you name it. They tried a lot. Elijah Molden has been the exact player they've been missing next to him, and it's why he was their number two really priority in free agency behind Khalil Mack, to get him back under contract, because that is just how important he was last year. And you're right. I mean, to have somebody back there that can make plays on the football, cover ground, but also be a trusted line of last defense, to be a sure tackler on the back end, man, have we searched and not found that for so long. And Elijah Molden is that guy, and also a great communicator. Showed up against Atlanta, right? Him telling Tarheeb Still, hey, I got this, you go that way. gives him a pick right there, returning the favor after Tarheeb still had the deflection that led to an Elijah Molden pick against the Cleveland Browns. So great communicator, perfect piece on the back end with Derwin James, and nothing to be concerned about at this point. But we still have much more to get into, including the biggest training camp battles on the defensive side. And I think it starts with Cam Hart trying to win his starting spot back all of a sudden. We're getting into that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. We've all been there logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose a spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in, because Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever, and prices actually drop the closer it gets to showtime, so you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. If you're tired of the endless scrolling trying to find the best deal, Gametime Zone Deals pick the best seats in your section for you. It's where I found my Blink-182's tickets and got really good seats to that. Also, I'm glad they brought up the memories, right? Because memories are so much a part of it, and I did that with my dad over the weekend at a Padre game. 6 tickets, surprise at the Padre game was really, really fun. And you guys can do that too. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. But again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. David, we talked yesterday about the biggest offensive camp battles, but there are a ton of exciting battles on the defensive side as well, and maybe none bigger than one that's happening at the outside cornerback position, because we talked about the fact that Derwin James was an all-pro slot corner last year as a really in-the-box, primarily safety, and how much he really kind of took off when they reduced his role to being much closer to the line of scrimmage last year. But what that means is the outside corner position heats up that much more, because it's not necessarily a case where a majority of the time you're going to have 3 actual cornerbacks out there, because if there were, it would be Cam Hart, it would be Donte Jackson, and it would also be Tarheeb Still, the rookie phenom. In OTAs and minicamp, David, it was not Cam Hart who had a really impressive rookie season out on the outside with Tarheeb Still. It was Donte Jackson, and we've talked about before, maybe that shouldn't be a surprise. You know, with the amount of money, $6.5 million per year, 2 years, $13 million, $7 million guaranteed. At the same time, man, like Cam Hart was pretty good. He's a young, promising player, and this is kind of shaping up to be one of the better defensive camp battles going in.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, I think this is a battle that's kind of a contrast in styles and what these two kind of players bring to the table, with Cam Hart being a bigger, more physical corner who really kind of, established himself as a guy that was an enforcer type, a guy that
best
really
run defending corner for sure.
Yeah, 100%. He was fantastic at it, and he made it hurt. He made that person feel it whenever he was tackling. He was trying to run through you, and he did a lot of the times. Unfortunately, that did lead to some concussion issues and some health issues. And, he had another shoulder injury, which we know at this point has kind of been a chronic issue for him, having had multiple shoulder surgeries, 4 of them to be exact, as Daniel puts up the 4 there. And that's just not an ideal way to start his career. The thing is it's not about talent, and it never has been about him. It's been about the ability to stay on the football field. And with Donte Jackson, he's a different type of corner. He's more the corner that is, a guy that's going to excel in zone coverage, not so good against man, but is an interception machine. He had 5 interceptions last year. You get 5 interceptions, I got news for you. You're going to be on the football field. There's no question about it. So this is going to be a very tough battle. I'm very excited to see how this one's going to unfold, because you look at the snap count, guys. 400 snaps on the outside for Cam Hart, over 700 for Donte Jackson last year. So these guys are going to be playing on the outside. This is going to be a big one. It's going to be a heated battle all training camp long.
Yeah, and Donte Jackson's the interesting one, because it felt like he wasn't used well in Pittsburgh, or just didn't necessarily fit well in that defense. And he had 5 picks, but the metrics absolutely hated him. I mean, you talk about coverage snaps, minimum 400 coverage snaps. He had the 2nd lowest coverage grade in the entire NFL, right? And that's a guy that is your starting corner right now. So obviously they get the benefit of the doubt, because what they were able to do with Christian Fulton last year in a bounce back year. I mean, even Elijah Molden was a big bounce back candidate that they traded for. So Steve Clinkscale, Jesse Minter give you the faith that they'll be able to, give him a nice bounce back season. And he's played at a high level in the league before. But yeah, Cam Hart, man, like He is their best run defending corner, but he just has to show that he can stay healthy and maybe show that he can get his hand on some footballs, right?
Yeah.
But I do think Donte Jackson felt like an expensive insurance policy, but they see him as more than that, and it's going to be up to Cam Hart for him to go take that job back and do what he was able to do as a rookie, but kind of have to earn it again, right? So that's going to be what the story is for him. But at the end of the cornerback room, David, depth chart, it is another interesting battle there, because for me, I've been consistent about this the entire offseason. It does feel like there's 3 players who are fighting for 2 spots at the end of the roster. I think Benjamin St. Juste is safe, somebody they brought in for a reason, right? But Jasir Taylor coming off of a down season, Dean Leonard with his injury history, it doesn't feel like those guys are guaranteed spots in 2025, and it feels like it's a 3-way battle between Jasir Taylor, Dean Leonard, and Triquez Bridges for those last 2 corner spots.
Yeah, and for Jasir Taylor, he's the guy that the coaching staff told us was dealing with injuries and was hampered by those injuries pretty much all season. And they talked very, very highly about him, but the play on the field didn't match the type of praise that he was receiving. He just was not very good. And so this offseason, by all accounts, it seems like he has showed up. He's in shape. We know he's got speed. He's a 4-3 type of guy there for sure. And so, he's going to have to, for me, have a very, very impressive training camp, because his special teams applications are not as great as, potentially Dean Leonard, as we know, is the pretty much starting gunner at this point. And Triquez Bridges, who is another guy who is probably going to be gunning for that gunner spot that Dean Leonard currently has right now. Another guy that has just about the same amount of speed as Dean Leonard does. Triquez and Dean both 4-3 guys as well. So I think that's going to factor in a lot into how this battle gets decided, because we're talking about the back end corners on the depth chart. So if you want to stay on the field, you got to be able to do some things on defense, but you got to be able to shine on special teams to be able to secure your spot on the 53-man roster.
And if you don't think that this is an important conversation or an important battle, right, let's remind the folks out there that this was a team that was starting Eli Apple at one point last season. So you have another thing coming if you don't think these spots are important. But we always talk about the gunner position. Maybe don't describe it enough for those who might not know what it is. There are 2 gunners on the punt return, or the punt unit, who are mainly tasked with getting down the field as fast as possible, being the first defenders there, and trying to limit the damage as much as possible. But let's not forget, Jasir Taylor and Dean Leonard are both starting gunners for this team right now. And Jasir Taylor has maybe the best special teams play I've seen in recent memory, when he ran a Broncos special teams guy into the returner, ended up forcing a turnover, tried to do it again without success, but one of the most memorable special teams moments in this team's recent history. Both guys can do it, but yes, you're right. You have to be able to play on the field and also provide on special teams if you're going to get those last spots. But let's talk about this next one here. RJ Mickens versus Tony Jefferson. This is a big one. I'm very excited to see what RJ Mickens can do, as really the only future kind of young, youthful player that they have in this room right now, a 6th-round pick in 2025, and a guy that has, traits physically that feel like they'll translate to the next level. Big, long, strong. He has all of that stuff. You have Alohi Gilman headed into free agency in 2026. But Tony Jefferson brings more right now. He has the savvy. We saw in that first game that he played last season, the physical tempo that he can set still, even at this age, right? With the blowing up screens and things like that. And just, what you're going to have to expect from him. Now, if Elijah Molden misses time, this is a moot point. Both of these guys could make the roster anyways, but they are still going to both have to show what they can do during this training camp in the preseason.
Yeah, and Tony Jefferson's the guy that came out of retirement basically to get back on the football field and get another shot, and he didn't make that decision till very, very late in the process. And so this year he's had an entire offseason to work with his trainers, get back into incredible shape, and really be able to, hit the ground running. And to me, I don't think this battle really is so much Tony Jefferson versus RJ Mickens as it is potentially RJ Mickens versus Adelshawn Phillips, another kind of special teams exclusive type of player. I think that's really going to be more so what it is, because Tony Jefferson, like you said, is the veteran. You know what he brings to the table. He is kind of that physical enforcer, has the ball skills, and kind of just that veteran presence in the back end. I just think it's someone who's very, very valuable to this football team. And RJ Mickens also, I don't know if, he's really in jeopardy either. I mean, that youth in the room, I think he's got to be the future there. A guy that we know played a ton of special teams in college and loves special teams and is going to continue to play that. And that's going to be something that's going to help him stick on the roster as well.
Yeah, and you're right. It might be just more about, can these guys prove the Chargers should keep 5 safeties as more than it's just these guys against each other. And they play kind of different style. They're different types of players at this point in their careers, right? But I do think you're not going to get much special teams out of Tony Jefferson.
No.
That's not really why you bring him on there, right? So RJ Mickens still has a great chance to make this team. And I think will make this team. I had both of them making it in our initial 53-man roster prediction. But Tony Jefferson, man, like Jesse Minter told you, though, like, he's here, he's back, he's still going to have to fight for it. I mean, when you're hearing that from the defensive coordinator himself, he knows what he has to do, but now he's in such a better spot to go actually even show more than he did last season with the full offseason under his belt, and he's literally told us that to our faces. So really excited to see what he can bring this year. But we still have more big camp battles to get into, including one of the biggest, which is Junior Colson versus Denzel Perryman and Troy Dye, showing he can get that starting linebacker role, and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. All right, we still have big camp battles to get into on this defensive side, with training camp only a couple of days away, opening up on Thursday. And as you know, we'll be back with you guys for that, doing a live show that night, I think is how we're going to do it, because we're so excited about the first day of training camp. And that means we get to cover 2 of the practices this week. But thank you for making us your first listen. Make sure you are following and subscribing wherever you can, because we know what tomorrow is, the Chargers alternate jersey reveal. Make sure you guys are back here to react with us for that tomorrow. Really excited and a great time to be back up to 5 shows a week so we can be here with you guys to talk about the most iconic jerseys getting a new wrinkle, no pun intended. But we also have the Locked On NFL Top 100 coming out tomorrow, July 16th, a Wednesday, where you guys will be able to see who we think are the top 100 players by all of our NFL experts. And you can find it on Locked On Sports Today, where they will make that reveal on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast from. Dave, let's get into the rest of these camp battles and start with a big one here. I have this battle as Junior Colson versus Denzel Perryman versus Troy Dye. I think it's another kind of 3-way battle. I know Denzel Perryman's the vet, but I do think, I'm not even going to say there's an argument for it. Troy Dye was the second best linebacker on this team last year. So to leave him out of this conversation, I think is disrespectful to what he has been able to do. But what this is about is Junior Colson, after a rough rookie season, showing that he can make that kind of Deion Henley-ish leap in year 2. I mean, if only we'd seen a 3rd-round pick linebacker do that before, right? He has the chance to do it this year, and it's really about, can he kind of take a full grasp of that starting position next to Deion Henley?
Yeah, I mean, last year for Junior Colson, it was, injuries that put him behind the 8 ball. And, even though he had pretty much every advantage that you could speak of heading into the league, having the same defensive coordinator and the same head coach that you had in college at the NFL level, everything was really, in line for you to have success right away. But as we learned, and we've seen it with linebackers throughout the history of the Chargers, recent history, not all of these linebackers are going to hit the ground running. Sometimes it takes more time for them to figure out the speed of the game, to be comfortable and to be able to play at this level. And I think, they had to bring Denzel Perryman back because of Junior Colson as an insurance policy. But they want this to be Junior Colson and Deion Henley. Believe me, that's the linebacker duo that they want to have out there. And, right now, and I've probably at every stage, really, if we're being honest, with Denzel Perryman, he's a 2-down linebacker. He is a liability in coverage. Junior Colson is a much more well-rounded linebacker as far as that's concerned, but he has to show it on the football field. He has to be the guy to take that job from Denzel Perryman, from Troy Dye, who, when he was asked to be, put on the field and play meaningful snaps, he played very good football. And I think that's a testament to him and, to that linebacker room for them staying ready. But they want it to be Junior Colson, but Junior Colson has to show that he's the guy and he has to take that spot away.
And that's the thing. It's always tough, especially with college linebackers. He was the guy, right? Like, he was such a good player coming out and fit so well in Jesse Minter's defense in that national championship winning year that they had at Michigan. I mean, one of the best players for maybe the best defense in the entire country. And I mean, he has it in there, right? It just felt like he was a full step behind as a rookie, and he's got to catch up to the speed in the game. And it's interesting because the coaches have specifically talked about him being in better shape this year. Yeah. So maybe that was a little bit of an issue because of all the time he missed in the offseason. It's hard. You're playing a much longer season. You're playing at a much different speed. To be in the type of shape And you've heard Sanjay Law be kind of the only one, maybe ballsy enough to kind of say, hey, these rookies are out of shape. Like it takes time to get in that kind of NFL shape. But I think the biggest thing kind of in this battle will just be who can make the biggest difference against the pass, right? Like I think all these guys have run stopping ability and can be good against the run. But outside of Deion Henley, who is going to affect the passer more out of these three guys? Because Troy Dye, Denzel, Perryman, not great in coverage last season. Junior Colson either, right? Which one of these guys, either as a blitzer, right, or in coverage, can show that they can make an impact at that part of the game? Because that's what they really need, as well as someone who can stop the run.
That's a good point.
Let's get this defensive line conversation started, because this is a room that may be hard to kind of put a 1v1 against it, but I did want to put these guys and stack them against each other, and it's Scott Matlock and Tito Ogbonnia, two former Tom Telesco picks that now go into 2025 fighting to prove that they should still be on this roster. And I think that with Scott Matlock seemingly wanting to focus on being a better defensive player and his role as a fullback very up in the air, I think it also puts his roster spot very up in the air at this point.
It definitely does, because you look at Scott Matlock, he only played 137 snaps on defense last year. He played most of his snaps on offense. And so if you're saying, hey, this is how we found, how you can contribute to the team, and you're like, I don't know if I want to do that anymore. Well, your primary occupation, the one that you came into the league for, you didn't do a very good job of affecting the game on that side of the ball. So it's going to be a big challenge. But also for Otito Ogbonnia, I think, heading into this season, there really hasn't been any kind of special moments for him. And he plays an unglamorous position on the interior of the defensive line, but there are guys on the interior of the defensive line all over the NFL that play the same position that have plenty of splash plays out there and really have shown the ability to be a difference maker. I haven't really seen that from Otito. And so I think his roster spot is definitely far from secure. So I think this is an intriguing battle, because to me, these two guys are at the bottom of the depth chart on the defensive line, and they're going to have to earn their spot on this roster for sure.
At least that's how it feels right now, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, the thing is, like, it's hard to know what a Naquan Jones, a guy they signed, for a pretty small deal in free agency, kind of where he stacks up on this, right? But they brought him in for a reason. And I think that's the thing for Tito is they don't necessarily need his size as much as they did last year now, and they had smaller guys at the position, like a Morgan Fox. Even Puna wasn't huge, right? Now they have more size. They have a Naquan Jones. They have a Deshaun Hand. They have a Jamari Caldwell, right? So keeping him just because he's a big dude, I don't think is obviously necessary for this team. And listen to this. I mean, last year, we take PFF grades obviously with a grain of salt, but out of 106 defensive linemen with 300 snaps, Tito ranked 100th, right? Like 83rd in run defense grade, 97th in pass rush grade. He still had the 10th most penalties with 4 out of any defensive lineman, so that's not great. And he ranked 76 out of 93 eligible pass rushing defensive linemen in pass rush win rate, right?
Bad.
Which is just your efficiency. And that's the thing. That dude got 276 pass rush snaps last year. That's way too many with that lack of efficiency.
Yeah.
Someone else needs those snaps, which I think firmly kind of puts him at the bottom of this group here with a chance to, make this roster. And Scott Matlock played much less snaps, but wasn't much better. So to have other guys to potentially put in that rotation is good, and it will basically make these guys have to improve their game to be getting a roster spot and getting into the rotation on this defensive line. Because, David, there might not be as many clear one-on-one battles, but there's also no clear starters in this room as well, which means going to camp, guys like Justin Eboigbe, guys like Jamari Caldwell, Deshaun Hand, Tier Tart, Naquan Jones, all of these guys are fighting for something.
Yeah, they are. They're fighting for their snaps. They're fighting for their spot in the rotation, because that's what it's going to be, right? They're going to have guys that are going to cycle through. You're going to have guys that are on the field for the pass rushing situations. You're going to have guys on the field for the run stopping situations. Now is the time that you're going to take the opportunity to figure out what your role is and try to carve out your specific amount of snaps that you're going to have in this defensive line rotation.
Absolutely. And, and now it's about, hey, what can a Jamari Caldwell show, right? And I think kind of like with the linebackers, I think it's not necessarily as specific against the pass, but it kind of is to this aspect of you're trying to replace the pressures that you got from Puna Ford and Morgan Fox last year.
No question.
And who can kind of bring that for you? Now, Tier Tart, I would say, is in line to be a starter for this team. He was more efficient as a pass rusher than Poona Ford even was last year, than Morgan Fox even was last year, just limited snaps. So I think it's about bumping that number up. But I'd say if I was trying to name starters right now, it'd be Deshaun Hand and Tier Tart. Outside of that, though, I feel like it's very, very much up in the air. And I like this, we've always said about this defensive line room, it's always going to be a rotation. So it's how big of a chunk, how big of a piece of that pie can you secure for yourself, which should bring the best out of this unit, right? And that's what you're hoping for. And it does feel like a much deeper room than last year, but they still need to see who can step up and be those difference makers like a Poona Ford was last season for you. But a lot of, I think, improvements, Mike Elston, the man himself, told you he feels like this is a more talented group, a better group than it was last season. So I'm excited to see what he can do with it. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. Make sure you guys are back here for tomorrow's show. I cannot stress it enough. We are talking about the Chargers' new alternate jerseys, the best uniforms in potentially all of sports, getting a little wrinkle, getting their alternate jerseys, and we're going to find out exactly what they look like tomorrow. And based on the look on Phillip Rivers' face on the Chargers, reaction video to some of their players and former players saying this, I'm very excited to see it and very excited to talk with you guys about it. So make sure you are subscribing and following for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listening wherever you get your podcasts from, as well as finding us on all of our social media where we post the show every day at Locked On LAC on Twitter, at Locked On Chargers on Instagram, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. So excited for that, and also getting into the rest of the biggest storylines that we're about to see unfold during Chargers training camp in 2025. So much to get into. Make sure you guys are back here with us tomorrow. But until then, take it easy and go Bolts.